Welcome. This is Ray Ford with FDA's Center for Drug Evaluation and Research Small Business and Industry Assistance Program, also known as CDER SBIA. Thank you for joining us today for our presentation on REMS Integration Initiative, an overview. This webinar will provide an update on the recently concluded REMS Integration Initiative. It will also introduce the new REMS document template. We'd like to mention that this activity has been pre-approved by REPS as eligible for up to 1.5 credits toward a participant's RAC recertification upon full completion. You may obtain your certificate by completing the survey, which will be made available at the end of our webinar. I will now introduce our speakers and panelists. First up, we will have Aaron Sherman, who will start us off with the session introduction. Aaron is a project specialist with the Drug Safety Operations within CDER's Office of Center Director. Then we will have the presentation, Introduction of the new REMS document template, with Drs. Gita, Toyserkani, and Suzanne Robottom, both of whom are regulatory health policy analysts with the Division of Risk Management in the Office of Medication Error Prevention and Risk Management within the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology. Next, we'll continue with an update on the REMS at FDA website, given by Lieutenant Commander Amy Ramanadham, Senior Regulatory Research Officer with Drug Safety Operations within CDER's Office of Center Director. Concluding the presentation segment of the webinar, we'll have an update on the REMS SPL, given by Adam Kroetsch. Adam is the Deputy Director of CDER's Office of Program and Strategic Analysis. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Aaron Sherman.
Thank you, Ray. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to be here talking to you about the REMS Integration Initiative, so let's jump right in. Objectives. We have two reasons for being here today. Our primary objective is to introduce the new REMS document template, but given that this was sort of the capstone project marking the conclusion of the REMS Integration Initiative, we also wanted to take this opportunity to discuss work completed under the initiative and tie it all together. Here you have our agenda, which Ray just went through. I'll note the feature presentation by Gita and Suzanne, and then Amy and Adam's respective project updates. And I will talk more in a few minutes about why we've chosen to highlight those two projects today. But I will note right now a little bit of foreshadowing that all pertain to how we present REMS information. But first, a little bit of background on REMS. So for anyone who might be unfamiliar, a REMS, or Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategy, is a required risk management plan that uses risk minimization strategies beyond labeling to ensure that the benefits of the drug outweigh its risks. It was an authority given to FDA under the FDA Amendments Act of 2007. FDA can require a REMS before approval if FDA determines a REMS is necessary to ensure the benefits of the drug outweigh the risks, or after approval if FDA becomes aware of new safety information and determines that a REMS is necessary to ensure the benefits of the drugs outweigh the risks. And currently, there are 76 approved REMS. Now that we are all experts on REMS, I will move on to key components of the REMS Integration Initiative. 1. Stakeholder outreach. It was the first thing we did. We continued it throughout the REMS Integration Initiative, and we are still doing it today. 2, and I would say, if you go back to when this started in 2011, if we had to define what success would look like, 3 key components would have been increased standardization of REMS, better integration with existing healthcare systems and practices, and reducing the burden associated with complying with REMS requirements. And then as part of all this, we also had specific PDUFA commitments that we had committed to complete under the REMS Integration Initiative. Stakeholder engagement. So this is a pretty comprehensive list of stakeholder engagement activities we've done over the last, going back to 2013. And I don't obviously expect you to read through and all of them right now, but we did want to have a list up there. These slides will be posted after. And as you can see, it was a lot. So really the first thing we want to say is thank you. Many of you came to meetings, wrote into dockets, and really provided us with carefully thought out feedback and suggestions for how to make REMS work better. And we're very proud of what we've accomplished here, but it would not have been possible without your thoughtful feedback and engagement. So first thing we really wanted to say is thank you. Next, I'll highlight three key themes from the stakeholder engagement that we did that heavily informed and directed some of the projects we're going to talk about today. First one, that REMS materials and requirements are not communicated clearly and consistently. Second, that specific activities and requirements are not always clearly outlined. And third, stakeholders reported spending excessive time trying to locate, understand, and comply with different REMS requirements. So throughout this presentation, we'll be explaining how we address this feedback and work to resolve these issues, but at a high level, it became clear pretty quickly that we had to take a close look at how REMS information was presented and communicated to the healthcare system. So what do we do? First thing, guidances. At the beginning of this initiative, we had one REMS guidance. We now have 7 REMS guidances, including 5 completed under this initiative, which I will go through right now. So first, the REMS modifications guidance provided clarity on what types of changes constitute a modification and what types of changes constitute a revision to a REMS. The statutory factors guidance enhanced clarity around how FDA applies statutory factors in determining when a REMS is necessary. The electronic submission guidance described how to submit a REMS document in electronic format using structured product labeling. And Adam will be coming back to that before too long. The revised format and content guidance introduced the new REMS document template, which uses the 4 Ws of REMS, and Gita and Suzanne will be talking about that shortly. And most recently, the DMF guidance discusses how members of a shared system can use a DMF to submit one collective set of files, thereby improving the efficiency of submission and review. I'll also note, I said we had 7 REMS guidances, so 2 others which were not developed under the initiative, but still definitely worth mentioning. One is the Guidance for Industry on Medication Guides, Distribution Requirements, and Inclusion in REMS, and that was published back in 2011. The other is the Draft Guidance for Industry on how to obtain a letter from FDA stating that bioequivalent study protocols contain safety protections comparable to applicable REMS for reference-listed drugs. That was published in December of 2014, and work is ongoing to finalize it now. Last thing I'll note on the subject of guidances, we've been working on a REMS assessment guidance and a guidance on the use of knowledge surveys and REMS assessments, and we hope to publish both of those soon. Next, priority projects. I mentioned we had some PDUFA commitments that we said we were going to complete. One of those was to identify and complete 4 priority projects. So you can see the projects on the screen now, and I will run through the deliverables. First, the benefit risk information. This report discusses best practices for counseling patients who might be considering treatment with a REMS drug on the benefits and risks of that treatment as compared to other treatment options. Second, continuing education. This report discusses a feasibility study FDA conducted on leveraging continuing education to provide training under a REMS. And what that report will go through if you read it is we found that doing so is likely not feasible when a REMS is being developed before approval due to the time constraints of the review process. However, it is more feasible after approval, either as a modification or if a REMS is being developed after approval. Third, pharmacy systems. We integrated REMS information into SPL formats so that it could be easily compatible with existing healthcare systems. That obviously led to the guidance I mentioned on the previous slide, and Adam will be talking more about both of these soon. And finally, practice settings. We created a new REMS website, now known as REMS at FDA, and Amy will be talking about that more in a few minutes. So my last slide, the 4 Ws of REMS. You may remember a few minutes ago, I said I was going to come back to why the REMS at FDA and SPL REMS were being highlighted today. And this is why. This is the common thread that links the template and the website and SPL format together. The 4 Ws of REMS are the key organizing principle behind how we are now trying to organize REMS information. I'm not going to walk through it in detail right now because our upcoming presenters do a far better job, but I wanted to call it out up front because it's the foundation for everything we've done here and are going to talk about today. So I'd say if you remember nothing else from this presentation, remember the 4 Ws of REMS. Last point I'll make before I surrender the fun chair to our next presenter. I said a few minutes ago that it became clear that there were issues around how REMS information was presented and communicated. So coming back to that point, the 4 Ws are our answer to these issues. And with that, I will turn it over to Gita.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Aaron. Today, Suzanne and I will go over the new REMS document template. For this portion of the webinar, we will provide a brief history about the REMS document, describe the new REMS document template initiative, walk you through the REMS document template, and provide some key points, and finally discuss submitting REMS in the new format. So what is a REMS document? As part of a REMS submission, applicants are required to submit a proposed REMS document and REMS materials, and FDA reviews and approves them. The REMS document is the so-called face of the REMS because it is what most stakeholders will see as the first piece of information describing the REMS program. It was introduced in 2008 with the first approved REMS. The REMS document was originally designed for regulatory purpose and was used to establish the REMS requirements for applicants. It also has served to communicate the requirements for stakeholders such as prescribers, pharmacists, and distributors, etc. It is the only document that captures requirements for all applicable stakeholders in one place. And in 2009, a draft guidance for industry titled Format and Content of REMS, REMS Assessments and Proposed REMS Modifications was published, which formally included a REMS document template. This is the template that has been used since the first REMS approval in 2008 and was also included in that 2009 draft guidance. This is just for illustrative purposes to show that the old REMS document was 2 pages long and did not include a lot of standardized language or instructions. Furthermore, the old REMS document was organized by the requirements as outlined in the Food, Drug Administration and Amendments Act of 2007 and used regulatory terms such as REMS elements. It included, as you can see, a section on medication guide, a communication plan, elements to assure safe use, or ETASUs, which were also further subdivided into the 6 potential ETASU, an implementation system, and a timetable for submission of assessments. So moving on to the development of the new REMS document template. Although for all REMS there is the REMS document and REMS materials, there is little standardization on how REMS requirements are described, which was one of the key drivers of developing the new REMS document template. REMS are described in a variety of ways and lack consistent terminology. For example, similar concepts may have a different name, and different concepts may have the exact same name. And as mentioned before, REMS were described using regulatory terms, and these terms may not be familiar to stakeholders such as prescribers and pharmacists. For example, the terms ETASU or communication plan don't necessarily provide useful information about how the REMS program works. We have also heard back from various stakeholders, as Aaron mentioned, specifically healthcare administrators, pharmacists, and prescribers, who are responsible for implementing the REMS requirements and are impacted the most. Some of the feedback that we have heard include that the requirements are not communicated in a clear and consistent manner. It is unclear who is responsible for implementing the REMS requirements, that too much time is spent trying to understand and comply with the REMS, and that it is difficult to integrate REMS into existing health information systems and healthcare delivery processes. So based on nearly a decade of experience and feedback that we have received from various stakeholders, we realized that we need to develop a method to share a clear and consistent information about the REMS requirements. We also need to create something that facilitates integrating REMS into the healthcare system, provide a better resource for industry for creating a REMS document, and provide a foundation for developing best practices and continuous quality improvement. So to address stakeholders' concerns and to improve how REMS requirements are communicated, we have taken the following steps. First, we characterize existing REMS by creating an inventory of REMS requirements and various ways they have been communicated across REMS programs. Second, we created a new way of communicating REMS requirements called the REMS participant section, which has actually evolved from what some of you might be familiar with from the REMS SPL initiative, referred to as REMS Summaries. The REMS participant requirements section standardizes how REMS requirements are described and minimizes unnecessary variation in how we are communicating these requirements. Third, we received additional feedback from stakeholders on the REMS participant section through ongoing outreach efforts to include focus group sessions to the REMS.FDA website effort, and we're also able to make use of the feedback provided during the REMS SPL pilot initiative. Finally, based on the feedback that we received, we refined the new template. In addition to some of the benefits of the new template, submitting REMS documents in the new format also enables information to be repurposed for REMS SPL submissions, as well as REMS at FDA website. Adam and Amy will speak in more detail about these two initiatives, but I just wanted to point out that once applicants start using the new REMS document template, creation of the REMS summary for purpose of submitting REMS in SPL will no longer be necessary. Also, the REMS at FDA website uses a similar approach to the new REMS document template. So once applicants start using the new template, the website REMS summary can be automatically populated using the participant section of the REMS document. So we're basically moving away from a regulatory-centric document to a stakeholder-centric approach. And the guiding organizational principle for the REMS participant requirements section in the new template is around timing of when a REMS activity needs to occur, which basically brings us to what Aaron mentioned earlier, the 4 W's of REMS: who, when, what, and with what. So who applies to the REMS participants that must meet the REMS requirements, such as the prescriber or dispenser. When is at which point during the care process this activity needs to occur, such as the point of prescribing or dispensing or administering. What is the activity that must be performed as part of the REMS, such as counseling the patient. And with what is the REMS material, such as the medication guide. And now I will turn it to Suzanne, who will actually walk you through the new template. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I have the pleasure of providing you an overview of the new format for the REMS document template, and I'm pretty excited about it. This slide here is more for illustration purposes, showing a series of screenshots of the new template. The red text that you can make out is instructional. Black text provides standard text for the most common REMS requirements. The new template is 19 pages in length. Now, some of you may be thinking, 19 pages. Well, this new template is substantially longer than the previous 2-page template. It does not necessarily result in a longer final REMS document. The intent with this template is to take some of the guesswork for you out of the drafting process, and it includes substantially more instruction as well as a variety of standardized text to choose from. Based on the REMS that we have tested, and we have tested many, we found the length to be slightly shorter to about the same compared to the old version. The new template reduces some of the redundancy, but it also presents the requirements in a table format, which creates more white space, making it easier to read, but also takes more space. In addition to the red instructional text and black standardized text that I mentioned earlier, you will also see blue text designating the titles of REMS materials and some text that appear in brackets. The bracketed text denotes text that needs to be entered with information specific to your risk and drug product. On this slide is some final nuts and bolts information about formatting the template. The formatting also has been standardized. The margins are now on a narrow setting, and the font for the headers and the requirement text are also specified. Now this is a pretty important slide here, and I want to make sure that we talk about the key considerations and that you become familiar with them. When you look at this template, you really need to view it as a menu of options based on the risk the REMS is intended to mitigate and the associated requirements that are necessary to assure safe use of your drug product. So for drafting a REMS document, you retain what requirements are determined necessary and delete what requirements do not apply. As you read through the template, it is also important to remember that the requirements of a REMS have not changed. How we organize them is what is changing. Lastly, but equally important, use the standardized text. As Gita mentioned, we've inventoried approved REMS, and the standardized text in the template represents the most commonly used requirements. Some of these requirements have multiple versions of standardized text to describe the different ways that requirement can be carried out. These different versions appear in black text, separated by the word "or" in red, so that you can further tailor your program. Now, let's get started discussing the organization of the template, shall we? I'll be going over each of the sections of the new template in more detail using the REMS for a fictitious drug Wellapaks. Wellapaks will be my example. As an overview, the new template includes 5 sections, starting with the administrative information, then the goals. The third section, titled REMS Requirements, is further subdivided into the participant requirements and the applicant requirements. This section most closely corresponds to the information that you would previously have found under the ATASU and implementation sections of the current template. The new template proceeds with the timetable section and finally ends with section 5, the REMS materials. So we will start at the very beginning, because the very beginning is a very good place to start, with the administrative information section. As you know, the administrative information, such as approval date of the REMS, last updated date, and applicant information, in the current REMS template is centered and appears as a header to the REMS document. If you look across the more than 70 approved REMS, you will notice a great deal of variation in the style and information in this header. You will also note that the current template does not state that this is the REMS document anywhere. If you look at the lower half of your screen, the new template adds the word REMS Documents to the header, and it organizes all of this necessary administrative information into its own titled section. The second section is the Goals section. Because the goal of a program is tailored to the drug and the risk the REMS program is intended to mitigate, there's no further standardization to mention here at this point. So we're going to move on, and we'll spend some time on the third section, titled the REMS Requirements. As I stated earlier, this section is divided into 2 subsections. The first section, the participant requirements, means the healthcare providers who prescribe, patients who are dispensed, healthcare settings or pharmacies that dispense, and wholesalers that distribute. This second subsection focuses on the applicant or sponsor requirements, and we'll discuss those in a few minutes. Using the Wellapaks REMS document to illustrate how we typically write the prescriber certification section is shown here on this slide using the old format. We state healthcare providers who prescribe Wellapaks must be certified, and then we outline the requirements as to what a prescriber must do to become certified, what requirements the prescriber must do with or for the patient, which are loosely organized based on timing, and finally what PharmFA, the applicant, must do to support prescriber certification. Within the new template depicted on this slide, you can see the look and the feel of the REMS document is substantially different. The REMS requirements are no longer organized by elements as described in FDA. The participant requirements are in a table format, organized by participant in a who, what, when, and with what structure, which is the guiding organizational principle that you've already heard us described a few times earlier in this webinar. In this example, the who is the prescriber prescribing Wellapaks. This appears as the section header next to the number 1. The timing category, or the when in this example, is listed on the left-hand side with all the required activities, or the what, associated with that timing category described on the right-hand side. When drafting the participant section, you want to include activities that are required for the REMS participant to undertake. You do not include activities or ideas that the REMS participants learn about, understand, or acknowledge, but do not agree to do. If there are different requirements for different patient populations, such as adult or pediatric, males versus females, you add a separate table for each patient population, modifying the header to be specific for that patient population and then listing the requirements accordingly. Similarly, if there are different requirements for different types of healthcare settings or pharmacies, you do the same. For example, if the requirements are different for a hospital compared to an outpatient pharmacy or an infusion center, each of those individual settings would have its own separate table listing the required activities specific to that setting. Lastly, a new addition to the typical prescriber and pharmacy or dispenser sections that we are used to seeing in a TASU REMS are the patient and wholesaler sections, so that we are more clearly explaining their role in the REMS program. Next, we will spend a little bit of time on Section B of the REMS requirements, or the requirements for the applicant. In the old template, requirements such as things that the sponsor is responsible for appear in a variety of places. Under each element, such as under the medication guide, communication plan, or a TASU section, as well as under the implementation system if a REMS has one. In the new template, all the requirements that fall under the purview of the applicant are located in a single section, Section B, Applicant Requirements. These are all the activities that relate to the applicant providing training, implementing communication activities, as well as all the operation and compliance activities that support the REMS. For this example, the applicant requirements section includes a subsection for communication-related activities. All the materials, as well as how these materials are distributed, are organized into a table with standardized text. The target audience appears on the left-hand side, and the associated materials and dissemination plan for that target audience are listed on the right-hand side. In this example, the target audience is all prescribers likely to prescribe Wellapaks. The applicant is required to distribute a REMS letter and fact sheet based on the distribution schedule on the right. The fourth section is the REMS assessment timetable. This section is identical or virtually identical to the current language you see in approved REMS. This language has had very little revision since the first REMS was approved in 2008. Section 5, the last section of the template, is the REMS materials section. This is a new section to the REMS document. In the old template, materials are listed at the end of each section corresponding to the element that material supports. In the new template, the materials are mentioned as part of the required activity they support, but no list appears at the end of each section. A complete list of all materials stratified by the material type and target audience appears in its own section at the end of the REMS document. As you can see here in the Wellapaks example, there are a total of 8 materials approved as part of this REMS, and they are organized based on the type of material and in some cases stratified by the REMS participant. I'll wrap up my portion of the webinar with a few notes about moving forward and submitting a REMS document. If you plan to submit a new REMS, we expect all REMS submissions to be in this new format. In fact, the most exciting news for us today is that the first REMS was approved in this new format last week for Sublocade and is now available on the REMS at FDA website. Hopefully this can also serve as another resource for you, and we would like to share that with you now.
Layout change, I'm not getting it.
Hopefully everyone can see this on the screen. Sometimes I think it's very helpful to see a real-time example. You can see the title at the top along with the name of the drug. We begin with the first section with the administrative information. The second section is the REMS goals section. Again, that hasn't changed substantially. The third section, which I imagine most of you are most interested in, is the REMS requirement section. For this particular program, it requires healthcare settings and pharmacies to be certified. As I had mentioned earlier in the talk, these sections may be separated out if the healthcare settings and pharmacies have different requirements. For this program for SUBLOCADE, the requirements are the same for both any sort of healthcare setting or pharmacy. So they are listed in the same table. If you continue to scroll down, you will also see that the wholesalers and distributors have their own separate section, and those requirements are fairly similar to what you would see in the implementation system over the last couple of years. You will also see that this has a communication activities section. The Indivior is required to both disseminate a Dear Healthcare Provider letter as well as a fact sheet. And then we move on to the additional applicant requirements that pertain to the operations and compliance of the program. As you continue to scroll down, you'll see the timetable section, and you'll note that that text is very familiar, or should be familiar to you, to those of you that spend lots of time reading REMS documents like I do. And finally, your REMS materials section, which lists the 4 materials that are approved as part of this program. We'll go ahead and switch back to talking a little bit more about submitting a REMS document. For those of you who may be listening that haven't approved REMS and you're wondering what to do about that, we do not expect that you submit a modification solely for the purposes to convert to the new format. We recommend submitting the conversion to the new format along with other modifications. And rest assured, we are ready to assist you in converting your REMS document to the new format. We are excited here at the agency. And lastly, as Aaron had indicated, we want your feedback. We are very interested in your feedback on this template, and we are encouraged we encourage you to provide feedback on the new REMS document template and the accompanying guidance. While the new template does represent what we believe is a very big improvement, we also understand that there is more to learn. And now, with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Amy so that she can discuss updates to the REMS at FDA website.
All right, great. Thank you, Suzanne. My name's Amy, and we're going to switch gears here, and we're going to talk about the REMS website. And so I have the privilege to talk about FDA's REMS website called REMS at FDA. So as the name suggests, REMS at FDA provides information about REMS. So at its most basic feature, the website makes REMS documents and materials available that was described in the previous presentation available to the public. And while this feature is foundational to the website's design, the website has many more features. One more. Thank you. All right, so over the next 20 minutes or so, I will describe how the website is organized to meet the needs of different users, what enhancements were recently made to the website based on user feedback, and what features are included on the website, including displaying the REMS participant requirement section of the new template. So this is organized in the 4Ws format that we just learned about and provides users quick access to information about what is in the REMS and what they need to do. So as a brief history, the first REMS website was launched in 2008. And the 2008 website simply listed all the REMS documents and materials in a single PDF. And while this met the statutory criteria, FDA heard from users that the website was difficult to navigate and know what to do. Also, the website became more complicated for FDA to manage over time as REMS and REMS-related policies changed. So in 2014, FDA made redesigning the website a priority project under PDUFA, which Aaron mentioned earlier. So in 2015, FDA met this PDUFA commitment by launching REMS at FDA website. So the website is a centralized, standardized, reliable, and user-friendly repository of information about REMS that can help stakeholders understand and comply with REMS requirements. Hopefully, it minimizes the confusion associated with complying with multiple REMS programs, and it provides users with access to convenient, up-to-date, and comprehensive information. So in July of this year, FDA continued to improve the website by launching version 2.0. And the enhancements of version 2.0 were based on user feedback collected after the REMS at FDA website was launched in 2014. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to point out what some of those enhancements are that we made in version 2.0. So we know that there are a variety of people that come to our website and use the website, and they're looking for slightly different information. So these users include patients and healthcare providers. So these healthcare providers are the people that prescribe, those that dispense and administer drugs with REMS. We also know healthcare distributors that provide care across a continuum of settings, such as an acute care hospital or private physician practice, are using our website. Wholesalers, drug data vendors that are people that come and repackage information to use in health IT and drug dispensing systems. We have academic researchers, industry, and FDA. So each individual user has slightly different wish lists and user requirements for the website. And while REMS at FDA aims to meet as many user requirements as possible, the website prioritizes the requirements for patients and healthcare providers first. So what do these different groups of people want to know? So first are patient and healthcare providers, and they want to know about a specific REMS. In other words, does this product I use have a REMS, and what do I have to do to comply with the REMS? A health system pharmacist, who may be the REMS coordinator for the organization, wants to know how to implement one or more REMS. The questions they ask are, who are the participants and what do they have to do in this REMS? How does this compare to other REMS that I've implemented in my organization in the past? And do we need to set up new systems or processes to implement this REMS? Third, it's researchers, industry, FDA. They want to study REMS in general. And their questions are, how many REMS are there? What elements do they use and what's required of participants? And how has the REMS changed over time? And finally, the drug data vendors are the group that want to know how I can download and extract the information from the REMS website. So in the next portion, I'm going to be showing you how the website is organized, and then I'll be showing you slides and pointing out specific features. So to start with, the overall website is organized starting from the home page, which is on the left. The home page includes a searchable and sortable table of current REMS, and this table contains links to REMS-specific pages where you can find more specific information. The blue arrow is showing the REMS-specific pages, which include a listing of what participants need to do to quickly orient the prescribers, patients, and pharmacists, links to relevant information including labeling, drugs at FDA, the application holder's REMS websites, REMS documents, and materials. Also of note is the REMS logo at the top of every page, and this is a signpost and helps people navigate back to the home page. From the home page, you can also select the Reports and Data Files link, which contains more detailed REMS data, including historic REMS information that's in downloadable CSV format. So this is where people would go to extract more information. So the bullets on this slide summarize what I previously pointed out, but with the bonus information in the fourth bullet. So in addition to all of these other features, the website uses an adaptive design to view from a mobile device. We know that approximately 10% of users view the website using a mobile device, so we want to make sure that they're able to easily access the information from their phones or tablets. All right, so next I'm going to walk through some specific features of the website, starting with the home page. So at the top of the home page, you'll see a series of links, and the first one I'm pointing out is the Contact Us link. Users can ask questions or submit comments to the REMS website, and this is a mailbox that is monitored and answered by CDER's Division of Drug Information. There's also a Get REMS email alerts link. So if you're a user that's interested in signing up for an email distribution list, you can receive a monthly digest of changes, which include approvals, modifications, revisions, and releases that happened over the past month. And again, I'm pointing out the reports and data files page, which in subsequent slides I'll walk through in more detail. So moving down the home page, there's a listing of all current REMS. And so as of today, there's 76 REMS programs. So in version 2.0, each of these 76 REMS programs are available. And this is in the earlier version, we just showed 10 results per page. So this update to version 2.0 is primarily addressed concerns of users viewing the website from a mobile device, and they wanted to see a full history by scrolling to the bottom and not loading multiple screens. So above the table is a search bar that allows users to search for the current REMS using a keyword including the REMS name, active ingredient, or element. And sometimes it might not be obvious if a drug product, what part of a REMS it's in by the REMS name alone. So for example, extended release long-acting opioid REMS. There's many products within that REMS. So this search bar hopefully helps to address that issue. So one example is searching by the established name fentanyl. So in this example, when you start entering at least 3 characters, the search bar will return results. And so for fentanyl, there are 3 different REMS programs which products based on their dosage form, including if they're tablet, transdermal, transmucosal, will be a part of. Another example is that you can search by using shared system. So this will filter for all the shared system REMS, which there are currently 10. The screenshot here is only showing you 3 of the 10. And you know it's a shared system because the term shared system REM appears below the REMS name. All right, so to wrap up the home page, at the very top, there's links to print or download a current list of REMS in a CSV or Excel format. In version 2.0, you can print or download information that is filtered in the table. So for example, if you were filtering by shared system, as we did on the previous slide, the report or download will only give you 10 results. But if you wanted a full list of the 76 REMS, you would leave the search bar blank. We have the REMS approval date. This is new to version 2.0. The REMS approval date is the date the FDA approved the REMS, and this date can be different than the product's approval date in the circumstances that the REMS is approved after the product was already marketed. The third column is the last updated date. This last updated date captures the last time the information on the REMS specific page was updated. So next, I'm going to walk you through the REMS specific pages, and we're going to use isotretinoin iPledge REMS as an example. So what I'm showing you here is searching for isotretinoin, and how you would get to the REMS specific page is selecting that link underneath. All right, so when you open this page, you would come to this view. So notice along the top, information on the REMS specific page is organized by tab. The Products tab answers what medicines are included in the REMS. So this tab would only show up for shared system REMS and list all the products that are a part of that REMS. So the screenshot is showing the first 5 of the 7 results in the iPledge REMS. Within the table for each product, there is a link to the prescribing information and medication guide, which is on Daily Med website, and the drug approval information on drugs at FDA. So a REMS for an individual product REMS, in other words, not a shared system, does not have a products tab. Instead, you would get the Daily Med and drugs at FDA link above the tabs, and it's listed near the title. All right, so next is the Goals tab, and this answers what is the purpose of the REMS. So this is a new feature of version 2.0, and the REMS goals comes directly from the REMS document here. All right, so next, selecting the Summary tab, and this answers what participants need to know, including a link to the application holder's REMS website. So if the application holder is required to have a REMS website as a part of their REMS, it would be located here. And we, FDA, review the application holder's REMS website and approve by FDA. But the website is external and managed by the REMS program. So underneath is an overview of each REMS for a participant, and this is the heart of REMS at FDA and addresses what users wanted most, to be quickly oriented to what is required in the REMS. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you what the website looks like when you expand one section within the overview. So in this example, I've expanded healthcare providers who prescribe isotretinoin products must. So this organization should look familiar by now. It's in the 4Ws format, and people find out who has to do what and when they have to do it and with what. So over time, this section on the website will be replaced with information from the REMS participants requirements section that's a part of the new REMS template. And also in this version 2.0, we added links to the REMS materials underneath in the summary. All right, so the next is the REMS materials tab. So this is a listing of the REMS document and materials. These are the same materials that are referenced in the summary tab on the previous slide. They're just organized in a single comprehensive list. And the last tab is the updates tab. So this answers the question, what updates have been made to the REMS? This summarizes the change reason. It comes from the approval letter. And so this was added in version 2.0 and really addresses the most frequently asked question that we get primarily by healthcare providers. When FDA takes action to update a REMS, people want to know what changed. So you can come here in real time and figure out what changed on this REMS website. But also remember, you can sign up for the Get REMS email alerts at the top, and you can get a monthly digest of all the REMS changes that month. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to walk you through the report and data files page, what I keep referring to, which is accessible as the link at the top of the home page. This is for users who are interested in more detail and historical information about the REMS. So the first section on the page is for reports, and this was an update in version 2.0. The report section provides a current number of the REMS, which is essentially a count of the REMS from the table on the landing page. So these numbers are current every time the website is updated. So the screenshot is out of date because we put it together last week, but if you go to the current site, it will show that we have 76 approved REMS programs. Also in the report section is the released REMS report. And so users can open this report to find a listing of REMS that had previously had REMS, but they're no longer required to ensure the benefits outweigh the risks. So if you open up this report, this is the information that you would get. And this is a listing of REMS that were released and sorted by the date that they were released. The second part of this section is for the REMS data files, where you can download and extract information. We make available 4 CSV files which users can download, and the data contained in these files is described in the ERD and the data dictionary below. So giving you a very quick example of the kind of information, I'm going to show you what it would look like if you open the REMS version tables. It would open something like this. So this shows you the history for a REMS that is since been released for Epogen Procred. So it was originally approved in February 2010 with a medication guide communication plan at TASU, an implementation system. You would follow it down and see that the communication plan was released in December of 2013, and then the whole REMS program was released in April of 2017. So essentially in this table, you can piece together the history of both current and released REMS. So there's a lot of valuable information that you may be interested here. So to wrap up, FDA, hopefully you can tell, has made a series of enhancements to the website based on your user feedback. I've noted some of the new features released in version 2.0 this year. The REMS specific pages display information from the REMS participant requirement section from the new REMS template described by Gita and Suzanne. And this is to help patients and healthcare providers quickly know who does what, when, and with what. And finally, FDA plans to use REMS SPL, which Adam will be discussing next, to maintain the website. So at the very bottom again, here's the link to our website. And so with that, I will turn it over to Adam to discuss REMS SPL.
All right, thank you, Amy. My name is Adam Kroetsch, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. I'm here to review and recap and update everyone on our project to bring REMS into structured product labeling format. Those of you who are regular attendees of this webinar series may have heard me talk about SPL before, REMS SPL before. We'll be going over some of the same things that I've talked about in the past, but throughout I'll be tying it back to the initiatives that we talked about earlier, in particular the new REMS document template, and talk a little bit more about how that new template affects the SPL files. But first, what is SPL? SPL is a data standard for capturing information about drug products, and it actually stands for Structured Product Labeling, but it covers product information beyond just labeling. For example, SPL is used to register drug manufacturing facilities with the FDA. SPL isn't actually managed by the FDA, but rather it's developed and maintained by a third-party organization called Health Level 7 International, and they're a standards development organization. Now, this proposal to capture REMS in SPL format became part of the REMS integration initiative thanks to a commitment we made that Aaron spoke about earlier to identify certain priority projects. So incorporating REMS into SPL was one of those priority projects as part of our PDUFA 5 commitments. And this commitment came in part because of the desire on the part of stakeholders, and in particular another standards development organization called the National Council for Prescription Drug Programs, or NCPDP, to have REMS information more standardized, more readily available, and more readily integrated into the healthcare system. So I'm going to be spending a little bit more time throughout the rest of this presentation talking about how SPL does that. But before I go into that, I'd also, since I mentioned what SPL is, I would also like to mention what SPL is not. So SPL is a standard for product information, but it's actually not currently used for the exchange of patient-specific or healthcare provider-specific information. And the reason I want to make that distinction is because in REMS, as they're being carried out, there is a lot of information being exchanged, and that's not something that SPL necessarily is able to do. For example, you wouldn't be able to use SPL to enroll in a REMS, to prescribe drugs, or to monitor your patients. Really what SPL is an informational standard that's designed to provide information about what the REMS requires. There is a related effort called the REMS Platform Standards Initiative that's actually being set up to develop standards to exchange those more patient-focused and healthcare provider-focused pieces of, or healthcare provider-specific information. So getting back to SPL, when REMS is submitted to the FDA, as you've heard already, we receive two types of documents. We receive those REMS documents, which going forward will hopefully be in the new format, but may also be in the old format. And in addition, we receive some materials that are designed to help facilitate the activities that are described in that REMS document. So REMS SPL is the format used to capture the REMS document, but not that other material. But REMS SPL does provide links and references to that other material so that it's easier to find. And I'll describe how those links and references work in a little bit more detail later. Now, if you open up an SPL in your web browser, an SPL file, this is what you would see. What you're looking at here is the part of the SPL that describes the 4 W's of the REMS. But if you go behind the scenes and you look at the underlying code, this is what you'd see. This is what REMS SPL, in a sense, really looks like. And the real power of SPL lies in this code. This is structured, machine-readable information that can readily be exchanged and integrated throughout the healthcare system. So as I mentioned before, the goal of our presentation today is to describe how SPL can make REMS information more consistent and standardized, more accessible, and help integrate REMS into the care process. So I'm going to go through each of those, and I'm just going to start by talking about how REMS SPL makes REMS information more consistent by making sure that every single REMS is provided in a consistent 4 W's format. So you've all seen this table before. These are the 4 Ws that can be used to describe what REMS participants have to do. And this is obviously a major feature of the REMS document template. But one key thing to note is that SPL makes sure that even REMS that are using the old template will be using this consistent 4 Ws format. So any REMS that's in SPL format has this 4 Ws format captured. The way this works is that for REMS in the new format, the REMS participant requirements is already captured in SPL. But for REMS in the old format, the REMS document text is transformed into what we call a REMS summary. And that is, in turn, that format that uses the 4 Ws. And this ensures that all REMS have a consistent 4 Ws format in their SPL. And this not only makes the REMS files more user-friendly, but it's also crucial for another thing that we'll be talking about a little bit later, which are the REMS data elements. So note that one implication of this is that it's easier to transform new format REMS documents into SPL than old ones because you don't have to do that extra step of transforming the REMS document into the 4 Ws format. It's already, when you're using the new template, in the correct format. While we recommend that all REMS documents, and we expect all future REMS documents to be in the new format, I also wanted to note that the REMS SPL does still support old format REMS documents, and we do have an old format REMS document up in SPL format. So this diagram is showing how that old format REMS document and the new format REMS document differ in SPL. And again, just to reiterate, the key thing to note here is that what was once the REMS summary is, if you're in the new template, captured in the REMS participant requirements. There are also a few other changes to the organization of the SPL, such as the inclusion of a special REMS administrative information section. So if you're thinking about transforming your REMS document into SPL format, and you are planning to use the new format, this slide may be helpful to you, so this will be circulated after. So next I'm going to talk a little bit more about how REMS SPL makes REMS information more accessible. So right now, REMS information is made public when it's posted on our website, REMS at FDA. But the way that there's another path by which our REMS information can become public, and so I want to walk you through that really quickly. It starts when the company submits the SPL file to us. From there, as I mentioned already, it goes directly onto our website where it's made available to patients and the public and to healthcare providers. But it's also submitted to a repository hosted by the National Library of Medicine called DailyMed. And through that repository, it's picked up by health information suppliers and then can then be grabbed by health IT vendors who are purchasing data from those health information suppliers. And in turn, that makes it available in electronic health records and other tools that are used by healthcare providers. So with all of that said, that infrastructure exists for SPL data today, and it's being used for labeling today, and we expect that in the future, when a lot of REMS information is available in SPL format, that it will be available through this very same pathway so that it's more readily and easily integrated into the systems that are used by healthcare providers. So as I mentioned, we have the REMS at FDA website available as well to provide detailed user-friendly information for healthcare providers and patients. And as it happens, the information that's on our website is based on the information that's included in REMS SPL. So when we get a REMS in SPL format, we'll be using it to automatically supply the data for our own REMS website. And in the past, we've had to, and we continue to, employ a team of analysts to enter in this data manually. But thanks to the power of the structured information that we have in SPL, the website can now be automatically populated with that data, and you can get all of the information that you see here. So in other words, that structured SPL information, we're a user of that information, so we're very keenly interested in seeing things submitted in SPL for that reason, at the very least. So one last point about why SPL is so valuable, and perhaps the most important point of all, is that it really helps integrate REMS into the care process. So in REMS SPL, we have what, as we've talked about many times before, the 4 Ws. But one of the beauties of the 4 Ws is that they're readily available to be mapped to standardized data elements. So these elements are the keys to integrating REMS into the healthcare system and into health IT systems. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But first, let's revisit that tabular 4 Ws format that you've seen so much of today. So This is the format that's used to describe the REMS document template in the REMS, in the new REMS document template's participant requirements section. And for older REMS documents, this is what would appear in that SPL REMS summary. As you recall, at the top of the table is the who of the REMS, and that's coded to a corresponding data element called stakeholder. And then along the left, you'll see the when of the REMS, and that's actually also coded to a data element called protocol. Along the right are the what of the REMS, and that's coded to a data element called requirement. And then finally, those materials, which are in blue text, are coded to a data element called document reference. So each of the 4 W's is mapped to standardized structured data elements. And that's really powerful because that allows data elements to be comprehensively describe REMS in a way that allows them to be understood by health IT systems and integrated into healthcare workflows. And I'm going to go into each of these data elements in a little more detail first, and then I'll be describing in a little bit how all of that integration can happen. I'd also like to add that these data elements are one of the major reasons that in the past we've asked sponsors to transform their REMS document text into REMS summaries. Previously, these REMS summaries have been necessary for us because the data elements are organized along the lines of the 4 W's. So we needed that REMS in 4 W's format in order to be able to code those data elements. And the existing REMS documents in the old format were not organized along the 4 W's, so that required the sponsors to make that transformation. As I mentioned before, now that the REMS document no longer, it includes REMS information in the 4 W's format, we no longer need that transformation into REMS summaries. The REMS document text is already able to be coded directly to the data elements. And that also means that when you're using the new format REMS document template, it's much easier to map your REMS to the data element since you've already got it in that format. So now I'm going to talk about those data elements in a little bit more detail. And then again, this will get a little technical, but I'll go into a little bit more detail after these slides, exactly how you could use these data elements to help integrate REMS into the healthcare system and make REMS easier to comply with. So we'll start with the stakeholder data element, and remember, this corresponds to the who of the 4 W's. So the stakeholder data element uses standard terminology to describe the role of the participant in the REMS. So picture that line along the top of that 4 W's format. So you might, one way you could code it is as prescriber, you can code it as dispenser, patient, distributor, or other healthcare providers. The next data element is the protocol data element, and this uses a standard terminology to describe the steps that stakeholders need to carry out in the REMS and is organized along the medication use process. So these steps could include things like REMS certification, treatment initiation, dispensing, and these terms are combined with modifiers, and these modifiers can be used to specify with greater detail when a particular requirement needs to happen. So in addition to saying that something needs to happen at the time of REMS certification, you can add a modifier like before to say before REMS certification, or after, or 1 week after dispensing, or 2 weeks after discontinuation. All of these are options that can be applied using the standard terminology that's provided in the protocol data element. And all of this, again, is associated with that text that you saw along the left side of those tables in the when of the REMS. The third data element, and perhaps the most complex, is the requirement data element. This uses a standard terminology to describe all of the clinical or administrative activities that stakeholders need to carry out in the REMS. So if you recall, a lot of the standard language in the new REMS document template is around describing what the different requirements of the REMS are. And associated with that standard language are standard codes that are used to describe those elements as well. And then finally, there's the document reference data element. And that data element can be used to describe the material that's being used to carry out a particular REMS activity. Now, typically when we think about materials, we're thinking about PDFs, and that's one kind of material that can be included in this and associated with this data element. But there are also 2 other things that can be linked to a material. One is a website, which is referenced as a URL, and the other is an electronic data standard. So right now, you can use this materials section to make note of when a data standard could be used to perform an activity instead of a PDF. And this is This relates back to that point I was making earlier, that SPL is not a standard for transmitting patient-specific or prescription-specific information, but it can help enable the transmission of that information electronically using other data standards and can make note of when those other data standards can be used using this REMS document reference data element. And this is what the SPL looks like behind the scenes. I don't necessarily expect you to need to look at that, but to be able to read that. But this is an overview of what the data elements look like, and the power of these really comes into play when you see the different ways that the REMS information can be presented. So, if you use what you're seeing here is one way that that code that you just saw can be transformed to provide a more user-friendly presentation of the REMS 4Ws. And this is actually just one possible approach. And this is what you would see if you opened up a REMS SPL file in your web browser. There are also many other ways to transform that information in REMS SPL. For example, our website is another format that REMS SPL information in those 4Ws can be presented in using the code that's in the REMS SPL. If you're building an electronic health record, you could even use those codes to provide pop-ups and alerts at relevant times to healthcare providers, or trigger the automation of certain REMS activities in your system. And it's really the flexibility of this information, that structured data, that makes the REMS SPL so powerful and allows for integration of REMS into the healthcare system. One thing I'd like to caveat is that this integration doesn't happen on its own. So it's not that we put the REMS SPL out and all of a sudden everything that happens in a REMS is automated. But what SPL is providing is the information that you need to be able to do this in a structured, user-friendly format. And we hope that stakeholders will make use of it, and we expect stakeholders to make use of it because they're already starting to do a lot of this on their own. The example that you see on the screen here is an organization, the Kaiser Managed Care Pharmacy, that took old format REMS documents, which are not always, as we've heard, the most user-friendly documents, and extracted the same kind of information that we put into REMS SPL and uses it to help drive the automation and workflow in their pharmacy system. So we expect that the availability of structured REMS information will make it possible for additional healthcare providers and health systems to be able to do this. So now I want to talk over a couple of different scenarios just to give you a sense of what you can do with these 4Ws information in the REMS SPL. And the first scenario I'll go through is a prescriber. So imagine that you're a doctor and you're about to start a patient on a drug that has a REMS, but you don't realize that the drug has a REMS. And this is pulled from real life. These are things that sometimes happens. You don't necessarily know when you're about to prescribe a drug that you have a REMS. We hope that we get the word out as well as we can, but sometimes it's just the prescriber is just not aware. Fortunately, thanks to the availability of the information that was captured through SPL, the prescriber's electronic health record contains information in the 4Ws format about that REMS. Using that stakeholder or WHO data element, the AHR is able to notify the prescriber that they have a role to play in the REMS. Using the protocol, the when, and the requirement, what data elements, the electronic health record can also notify the prescriber that there are several steps that they have to undertake when initiating therapy, and that could include providing the patient with certain counseling materials. And then using that with what, or document reference data element, the electronic health record can provide a copy of that counseling material to the prescriber at the time that they're about to prescribe so that they can print it and give it to their patient. Another scenario, and this one is for pharmacists. Imagine that you're a pharmacist about to fill a prescription for a drug that has a REMS, and perhaps you're aware that a REMS exists for the drug, but you're not aware that the REMS has recently changed. But fortunately, again, this SPL data is available in your pharmacy system. So using that protocol, the when, and the requirement, the what data elements, the pharmacy system can notify the pharmacist that they now need to confirm that a specific lab test results on file before they can dispense the drug. So this is perhaps a new requirement that hadn't existed before. So even though the pharmacist knew they had a role to play in the REMS, they didn't necessarily know what they had to do. Now the pharmacy system is able to tell them. Using that document reference data element, the pharmacy system can note that the lab test results can be requested electronically. So I mentioned that document reference can be used not only to retrieve PDFs, but can also be used to specify when information can be exchanged electronically. So you could use SPL in this case to help facilitate the availability of that information electronically. So thanks to that trigger provided by SPL, you could trigger that electronic transaction and then check back with the REMS program to determine whether there is a negative lab test on file. So again, I'm going to mention that these things don't happen automatically when we put out SPL. They do require sponsors to continue to submit REMS in SPL format, and they're going to require healthcare institutions and systems developers to start making use of this data. But we hope these examples can show you the promise that SPL has to make REMS information more useful, more accessible, and better integrated into existing systems. So with all that said, I'll talk a little bit about next steps. So sponsors are already able to submit their REMS in SPL format, and once those REMS are approved, they're made available on DailyMed, and you can already see one REMS SPL file on DailyMed, and we hope more will be available there soon. We've also issued draft guidance, and Aaron mentioned this earlier, under FD&C 745AA. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that statute, and I expect many of you probably aren't, this is a statute that allows us to require the submission of certain files in electronic format by issuing guidance. So that draft guidance is out now. We're soliciting comments on it, and they are due, well, we don't quite have the date down here. It's March 15th, and we'll update that with the due date. Sorry about that. The electronic submission requirements will take effect 2 years from the publishing of a final guidance. So we're getting comments on the draft now. We'll issue a final guidance, and then 2 years after that is when the requirement would take effect. So between now and then, there will be plenty of opportunities for you to provide us with feedback. And with that, I'd like to just put out a few acknowledgments. SPL is really a group effort, and it involves a lot of different participants, including colleagues across the entire agency, including in the Commissioner's Office and here in the Center for Drugs. I'd also like to thank the National Library of Medicine, which maintains the DailyMed website and makes those REMS SPL files available to the public, as well as the National Cancer Institute, which keeps track of all of that terminology I was just telling you about, including the terms for all of the different REMS requirements through their enterprise vocabulary services. And last but certainly not least, all of the applicants and the pilot participants who helped us pressure test the REMS SPL and who've submitted REMS SPL. I'd like to thank you very much for your participation. So, and then I'd also, of course, like to thank all of you for attending. So now I'll turn it over to Aaron to wrap things up and introduce the Q&A.
They let me back in the fun seat for just a minute to wrap everything up. So here is our rundown. The REMS Integration Initiative started in 2011 with a lot of stakeholder outreach activities to evaluate and improve REMS. It ended just a few months ago after the selection and completion of a number of projects to address what we heard, including the new REMS document template, the REMS at FDA website, and incorporation of REMS into SPL format. And of course, all of these are backed by the 4W framework. We also published 5 guidances and 3 reports discussing best practices from a decade of experience with REMS. But, let's see, just because the REMS Integration Initiative is ending, that does not mean the end of REMS improvements. As Suzanne said earlier, we always have more to learn. So efforts continue to improve and evaluate REMS, and one example is the REMS Platform Standards Initiative. So that's our show for today. Thank you everybody so much for joining. If you'd like more information on the REMS Integration Initiative or REMS Platform Standards Initiative, including access, for example, links to the guidances and reports we mentioned today, that can be found on the REMS Integration Initiative website. The new REMS document template can be found on the REMS Basics website. For instructions on creating SPL documents, consult the SPL Implementation Guide. We are also here to help and would love to hear from you if you're interested in converting your REMS into SPL format. Finally, if you have any questions for us, please don't hesitate to reach out to the DRISC policy team at rems@fda.hhs.gov. And of course, the REMS at FDA website is your resource for all kinds of program-specific and general REMS information. Don't worry though, you don't have to remember any of this because both the presentation and slides will be posted online shortly, thanks to our wonderful SBIA webinar team, without whom none of this would be possible. Last thing I'll mention, I started off today talking about stakeholder feedback, so I'll come full circle and end with it. We currently have 3 open dockets, some of which were mentioned earlier. The revised format and content guidance docket actually closes in a week, next Monday, December 11th. The DMF guidance has a docket that's open until January 8th, and the SPL guidance, as Adam just mentioned, has a docket open until March 15th. Links to these dockets will be included in a follow-up email to this presentation. If you are so inclined, please comment. We always want to hear from you. With that, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back shortly to answer some of your questions.
Welcome back. We're ready to answer some questions, and hopefully this will be helpful to all of you that have stayed and hung in with us. We're going to start with some of the questions that we received throughout the presentation. The first one was with regard to the Verdana font and using it within the REMS document template. The question was, could applicants choose to use a different font because you are receiving a validation error when submitting through ECTD?
So basically, you can use the font. The FDA side validation will not reject it. It's probably that your validation tool is probably alerting you because it's not recommended font listed in the PDF specifications. But once you do submit it, the ECTD FDA will not reject it.
The next question that we received was with regard to shared system REMS, and if you're looking at the front of the REMS document template in the administrative information section, there is a place for applicant. And this particular question, we received a couple of these, was curious as to what to do if you're a shared REMS program. Similar to what we do on REMS documents now, we do not list all the applicants of a shared system REMS, and that is consistent with what we plan to do moving forward with the new REMS document template. So that would simply be deleted because you would not use it if you're a shared system.
The next question we got is if FDA issues a REMS release letter, meaning that REMS is no longer necessary to ensure the benefits of the product outweigh the risks, might it still be required to have a medication guide as part of the approved labeling? And the answer is yes. Even though you're released from the REMS requirement, the medication guide is still part of labeling.
We got more than one question about submitting the medication guide, so I think hopefully that answered those questions. We also received a question about the relationship between REMS drugs with boxed warnings. I think the easiest way to kind of explain that relationship is that most drugs with a REMS, most of them do have a boxed warning, but that is not to say that all drugs with boxed warnings have a REMS.
Another question we received is, within the new format, can you have one REMS for two separate products if the target audience indication is the same? And the answer is yes.
We received a couple of questions about clinical trials and how they relate to REMS. I think that most easily we can state that mitigation strategies may be part of a clinical trial protocol, or how the clinical trials will run or were run may help to guide the risk mitigation strategies when we're considering whether or not a REMS is necessary to ensure that the benefits of a drug outweigh its risks. Another question we received, we did receive a couple of different questions with regard to how the agency communicates about a REMS requirement. Typically, this can be done at any time throughout the review cycle. It often depends on whether or not a sponsor has chosen to submit a proposed REMS from the beginning. Oftentimes, it is something that is addressed at the mid-cycle communication as well. It is often subject of an advisory committee. So you can, as you can imagine, as the agency reviews an application, the risk-benefit profile evolves as we learn more about that drug product. So if something comes up late in the review cycle, and it may, it is possible that the agency could determine that a REMS is necessary late in the review cycle, and that is as painful for you as it is for us.
Someone had sent in just to verify, from now on, all REMS must be submitted in the new template. So as we said in the presentation, we expect new submissions moving forward in the new format, especially given the benefits to REMS participants, stakeholders, as well as the benefits for the applicants. As Adam mentioned, if you're planning on submitting your REMS in SPL format, by submitting in the new template, you reduce the need to create those summaries. So you reduce a step in your process for SPL submission.
I think the last question that we received during our presentation was with regard to REMS assessment. It says, does FDA still expect to see or issue a guidance on REMS assessments or REMS assessment framework? We did address this as part of the presentation, and that is FDA's expectation is to issue a guidance on REMS assessments.
We received a question about when is the new template available and how can we obtain more information. As we said, it's already available. It's on our REMS.FDA basics website. And if you have any more questions or need information on it, you can email us at rems@FDA.
Hi, this is Adam again. We got a few questions about SPL, so I'm going to go through some of those. First question, are SPL and XML the same thing? It's a good question. So SPL stands for Structured Product Labeling, and that's the format that we are putting REMS in, and that's actually written in the XML language. So XML is used to develop SPL. Another question. Is there any relationship between the SPL and the WHO DICT and MEDRA dictionaries? There isn't any relationship between SPL, REMS SPL in those dictionaries. I can speak to the REMS SPL specifically. Those dictionaries are not used in REMS SPL. Another question about SPL, with which software editor are SPL documents created? So you actually have your choice. We provide an editor on our website, on our SPL website, and we have, I think, provided a link to that website as well. You're also free to use a text editor or any other editor of your choice. Many submitters choose to use their own editor. Next question. Is REMS SPL required for submission? And there are a few other related questions about the requirement. The answer is right now, REMS SPL is not required for REMS submissions. Our guidance, which is in draft, will go final, and after 2 years after it goes final, all future submissions would need to go into REMS SPL format. So at the very earliest, this requirement would take effect if we're doing the math in 2020. And even then, when it takes effect, you wouldn't have to retroactively go back and change anything that's already been submitted. It would apply to all future submissions. So for now, we recommend and would be thrilled if you were to submit your REMS in SPL format, but it can also be submitted in the other formats. Another question, is it necessary to learn SPL programming if you're a REMS users? Do you think users need to be programmers? So you don't need to know SPL programming if you're just a participant in a REMS. The idea is that the SPL programming would all happen behind the scenes, and in fact, the typical participant in a REMS doesn't really need to know anything about SPL at all. If it's successful, it'll be invisible to users, and they'll just find that the REMS information is more conveniently accessible to them. However, if you are planning to make use of SPL and integrate it into an electronic health record or into a health IT system, then you would need to learn about the details of the SPL specification. And likewise, of course, if you're a sponsor looking to submit SPL, much of the programming is fairly straightforward, but it may be helpful to learn a little more about how it's programmed. Another question. How does information get submitted to NLM DailyMed? The answer is that it comes in automatically to DailyMed. So when SPL is submitted to us, we immediately forward it over to DailyMed, and after a review of the content of the SPL, it will display on DailyMed's website. Another question, is there any REMS submission scenario where the previously used REMS Summary section is used, or is the REMS Summary totally replaced by the Participant Requirements section in the new REMS Document Template? So in the event that a submission is made using the new REMS Document Template, it would completely replace the REMS Summary. There would not be a need to include a REMS Summary. We do, however, have older REMS documents in SPL format, and those would continue to need summaries until they move over to the new template. I believe that's the last of my questions. So that's it for questions for today. Thank you. I'm going to now turn it over to Ray to close things out.
Thank you, Adam. That now brings us to the end of this very informative webinar. As a reminder, to obtain the webinar completion certificate, which has been pre-approved by RAPS, is eligible for up to 1.5 credits towards a participant's RSC recertification. Please complete the survey. The link is here on the last slide. The CEs are available only for those who attend the live event, and the survey must be completed within 2 weeks from today. On behalf of CDER Small Business and Industry Assistance, we hope you enjoyed today's presentation and found it helpful. We look forward to your presence at future webinars, which will be advertised on our website at fda.gov/CDER SBIA webinars. Thank you.